For 10 long years, I believed I had a perfect marriage with my wife, Claire Robinson, a belief so deeply ingrained that every Sunday dinner, every holiday getaway, every weekend barbecue in our beautiful four-bedroom house in that quiet suburban neighborhood felt like a celebration of an ideal that many envied. I worked as a senior architect designing luxury buildings that defined skylines, and though my schedule was demanding, I took pride in creating structures that symbolized success and permanence, much like the life I thought I had built with Claire. She, on the other hand, was a corporate finance professional who traveled frequently for business meetings and high-stakes negotiations. Yet, despite her hectic career, she always found time for family, smiling through her departures and returns, assuring me that our love and our shared dreams were as steadfast as the foundations I laid in stone. I remember those early days vividly, the way she would twirl around our new living room, making plans for extravagant dinner parties, vacations to far-off lands, and even quiet evenings spent watching the sunset through our panoramic windows. Every detail of our home had been chosen with care and pride. The polished floor tiles that gleamed under the soft light, the custom nameplate on the front door proudly proclaiming Robinson, a symbol of our legacy together. I had built that house with my own two hands, or at least with my own vision and unwavering determination, convinced that it was not merely a structure but a sanctuary that would shelter our love and nurture our family as we grew old together. I cherished the traditions that had defined our family life. Sunday dinners where my younger brother, Jake, and my parents, Thomas and Linda Robinson, joined us in laughter and hearty conversation. Holiday getaways where the world outside faded into insignificance as we celebrated our bond. And weekend barbecues that turned our backyard into a realm of joy and connection. Yet, behind every carefully laid brick and every meticulously planned event, there was an undercurrent of unease I tried desperately to ignore. I recall the small moments when a glance exchanged between Claire and someone else, or a fleeting hesitation in her warm smile, would send a shiver of doubt through me, quickly smothered by the overwhelming desire to believe in our perfect life. I wanted to trust her implicitly, to cling to the notion that we were a team bound by unbreakable loyalty. So I silenced the warnings of my own heart even as they grew louder with each passing day. I believed that perfection was not only attainable but sustainable, that the love we had nurtured for a decade would forever remain immune to the vagaries of human nature. I envisioned a future where every plan we made, every promise we whispered in the quiet of the night, would stand as a testament to the unassailable strength of our union. In those moments of blissful ignorance, I reveled in the security and predictability of our life, unaware that the facade of perfection was nothing more than an illusion, a delicate veneer that hid a treachery so profound it would soon shatter everything I held dear. Little did I know that behind the smiles, behind the laughter shared around our family table, lay secrets and betrayals that would one day come crashing down like a house of cards, leaving me to confront the harsh truth that the people I trusted most were capable of inflicting a humiliation that would scar me for life. As I walked through the halls of our home, the echoes of our joyous celebrations resonated with a bittersweet irony, for each step I took on the polished floor reminded me of dreams built on promises that were about to be broken. I had envisioned a future filled with hope and mutual admiration, yet the seeds of betrayal had already been sown in the shadows, waiting for the moment to burst forth with devastating clarity. That picture-perfect life, meticulously curated over a decade, was nothing more than a fragile construct destined to be undermined by the actions of those closest to me. I now understand that perfection is a facade, a delicate illusion that can shatter in an instant, leaving nothing but the bitter taste of betrayal and the painful realization that even the strongest bonds can be severed by deceit. And so, as I stand at the threshold of a life I once believed was flawless, I must now confront the reality that everything I built, every tradition, every carefully chosen detail, was ultimately just a stage set for my greatest humiliation, a betrayal that would force me to rebuild not only my home but also my very identity. Over the course of several months, I began to notice subtle shifts in Claire's behavior that I, in my earnest desire to believe in our perfect marriage, tried to rationalize away. At first, it was the small things. A text message sent in the morning that was once filled with affectionate banter had grown curt and vague, lacking the warmth I had come to cherish. I noticed that she started dressing differently, choosing outfits that accentuated a side of her I hadn't seen before. And she suddenly took a keen interest in working out, spending hours in the gym with a fervor that was both admirable and disconcerting. More disquieting, however, was the way she began to guard her phone as if it were a sacred object. She would leave it face down on the table during our dinners, only to check it furtively whenever she thought I wasn't looking, a secretive smile playing on her lips as she read messages she refused to share. I remember the day she announced a business trip to Hawaii, a trip that would last 2 long weeks and was fully paid for by her company. "It's a huge deal for my career, babe. I'll be swamped with meetings," she had said, her tone light and confident, leaving little room for questions. I accepted it at face value, comforting myself with the notion that career demands could occasionally take precedence over our time together, that it was all part of the sacrifices we made for our future. But then, one day, when I mentioned her trip casually to Jake, my once close younger brother, he mumbled something dismissive about being busy with work, his eyes avoiding mine in a way that sent a prickling sensation down my spine. Soon after, my normally eager-to-visit parents, Thomas and Linda Robinson, canceled plans to come over, offering weak excuses that felt rehearsed and insincere. A gnawing feeling of unease began to take root in my chest, a creeping suspicion that something was amiss in the life I had so carefully built. I tried to dismiss these anomalies as mere coincidences, trifling matters that would resolve themselves in time, but the mounting evidence of change was impossible to ignore. In the quiet solitude of our once happy home, I found myself questioning the authenticity of every gesture, every affectionate word that now felt laced with a hidden meaning. The truth hit me when I least expected it, shattering the fragile veneer of our picture-perfect life in one cruel blow. It wasn't just the business trip or my brother's vague responses that unsettled me. It was the overall transformation in the way those closest to me behaved, as if they had all decided, without my knowledge, to keep me at arm's length. I felt increasingly isolated, betrayed not only by Claire's growing distance, but also by the inexplicable withdrawal of support from those I had always considered my family. And so, amidst the slow erosion of trust, the subtle changes coalesced into a painful realization that everything I had built on the foundation of mutual respect and unwavering loyalty was crumbling before my eyes. It was as if a dark tide had begun to sweep through our lives, erasing the lines that had once clearly defined our bonds, leaving behind only uncertainty, suspicion, and the foreboding sense that my world was on the brink of irrevocable transformation. The unsettling changes, once dismissed as fleeting moods or minor quirks, now loomed over me like a storm cloud, their shadows lengthening with each passing day, until I was forced to confront the terrifying possibility that the people I loved were orchestrating a betrayal that would leave me utterly alone and exposed. They had stolen a piece of my life. My hands trembled as I double-checked my airline miles account and discovered that the first-class tickets for that very flight had been purchased using the miles I had painstakingly accumulated over the years. In that moment, the realization hit me like a freight train. They had not only betrayed my trust, they had betrayed me on every conceivable level, emotionally, financially, and as a man who had believed in the sanctity of family. I felt a cold, paralyzing shock wash over me, and I knew that I could not simply sit by and allow this transgression to go unchallenged. I did not erupt in a fit of rage, nor did I call anyone immediately to scream my pain into the void. Instead, I locked away that terrible evidence, my hands still shaking, and made a decision that would alter the course of my life forever. Without uttering a single word, I grabbed my keys, left the house that had once been our shared haven, and booked a flight to Hawaii. A flight that would not only serve as my confrontation with the betrayal unfolding before me, but also as the first step toward reclaiming what was rightfully mine. As I drove away from the life I thought I knew, my mind raced with conflicting emotions, a deep, searing pain mixed with a resolve that burned like a wildfire. I knew that I could not let this treachery stand unchallenged, that the truth of their betrayal needed to be laid bare for all to see, even if it meant dismantling everything I had once held dear. I thought of every laugh, every tear, every memory we had created in that picture-perfect home, and I felt the sting of betrayal more acutely than ever. In that moment, as the wheels of my car turned on the open road, I realized that I had two choices: to crumble under the weight of their deception or to fight back with every fiber of my being. I chose the latter, setting in motion a chain of events that would transform my heartbreak into a meticulously calculated plan for retribution. With every mile that separated me from the comfortable illusion of home, I could feel my determination solidify. I would gather every piece of evidence, every fragment of proof that they had stolen my life, and I would make sure that they paid dearly for the betrayal that had cost me not only my trust but the very essence of my identity. In that dark, solitary drive, I made a silent vow to myself that I would not rest until every lie was exposed, every secret unraveled, and every ounce of the stolen future reclaimed. The betrayal, as painful as it was, had ignited in me a resolve that would not be extinguished, a resolve that would force me to confront the worst of those I once loved and to rebuild my life from the shattered remnants of a dream turned nightmare. The day I had once celebrated as a triumph, a day when I had closed a major business deal that cemented my professional success, turned into an unbearable nightmare the moment I pulled into the driveway of our home. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the manicured lawns and pristine facade of the house I had built with every sacrifice I had made. I expected the familiar embrace of home, the comforting routine of stepping through the front door into a space that was unmistakably mine. Instead, I was met with a sight so surreal it defied all logic. A uniformed security guard, whom I had never seen before, stood resolutely at the entrance as if guarding a secret that I was not privy to. With a calm that belied the storm raging inside me, I greeted him and stated firmly, "Good evening. I live here." I reached for the keypad, the familiar sequence of numbers slipping through my fingers with the ease of a well-practiced ritual, only to have the guard step forward and block my path with an unyielding authority. "I'm sorry, sir. You are not authorized to enter," he said in a measured tone that left no room for argument. My mind raced, struggling to process the impossible. I was the homeowner, the man whose name was etched in every cornerstone of that villa, yet here I stood, locked out of the life I had built with sweat and hope. I repeated my claim, voice growing more insistent, only to be told that there were explicit instructions from the homeowner, a homeowner who, in every conceivable way, should have been me. A sick, twisting sensation gripped my gut as I looked around for answers, only to hear the sound of laughter drifting from the grand windows that overlooked the very room I once called my living room. There, bathed in the fading light, I saw them, Claire and that man, James, whose presence had always sent a shiver down my spine, reveling in a scene of unabashed luxury. They sat on the plush sofa as if they belonged there, casually drinking champagne with the ease of people who had taken over a life that was not theirs. In that moment, the polished floors and gleaming windows of my home transformed into silent witnesses to an act of ultimate betrayal. I watched, paralyzed by the shock and humiliation that surged through me, as Claire stepped gracefully onto the porch in a silk robe, her bare feet glistening on the marble tiles that I had painstakingly paid for, and spoke with a tone so icy it cut through the air. "Thanks for the $2 million inheritance." Behind her, James smirked, his eyes alight with triumph as he casually added, "Good luck starting from scratch." In that surreal instant, every promise, every dream, every carefully laid brick of my life crumbled into dust. I expected an explosion, a torrent of anger, words that would shake the very foundations of that house. But instead I felt a cold, measured resolve settling in. I turned away from the window without a word, each step heavy with the bitter realization that my world had been stolen from me by those I once held dear. Yet beneath that calm exterior, a storm was raging. A storm that would soon fuel my determination to reclaim everything that had been taken, even if it meant dismantling the lives of those who betrayed me. I left that porch with nothing but the promise of retribution echoing in my mind, vowing silently that I would not be reduced to a victim. Instead, I would orchestrate a comeback so complete that every lie, every act of treachery, would be exposed for what it truly was. As I walked away from the home that was once my sanctuary, I knew that my life, my future, and every fragment of my identity were now up for grabs. and I would stop at nothing to take them back. In the days that followed that crushing moment when I was locked out of the life I had built, a cold and unyielding determination began to rise within me, tempered by the fire of betrayal and the sting of humiliation. They thought they had won, that by stealing not only my home and my money but also my dignity, they could reduce me to silence and submission. But deep within, I knew that I would not yield. I would transform my pain into a meticulously calculated plan for revenge. I began by gathering every piece of evidence I could find. I saved every incriminating photo, every transaction record, every digital footprint that traced the web of deceit Claire and her accomplice had woven. Each file, each screenshot, became a building block in the fortress of retribution I was constructing. I recalled every late-night phone call, every furtive glance, every secret meeting, and meticulously documented it all, knowing that the truth, once assembled, would be undeniable. Next, I reached out to my trusted lawyer, a sharp and relentless divorce attorney whose reputation for dismantling fraudulent schemes was well known. Over long, hushed phone calls in the dead of night, I laid out every detail of the betrayal, how my joint accounts had been emptied, how forged documents had transferred ownership of my home, and how every act of treachery had been executed with a calculated precision that left no room for error. My lawyer listened carefully, his measured responses fueling my resolve as we discussed strategies to secure my finances. Transferring my money out of joint accounts, freezing credit cards, and filing fraud alerts that would put an immediate halt to their financial rampage. I watched as every dollar they had stolen was traced back to a transaction, every luxurious expense logged in an account that was supposed to safeguard our future. I coordinated with forensic accountants and financial investigators, building an airtight case that would expose every element of their deception. And then, with my evidence compiled and my legal strategy in place, I set my sights on the final phase of my plan, the trap. I arranged to book a return ticket on the very flight they would be taking back from their stolen vacation, a calculated move that would allow me to confront them head-on as soon as they set foot on home soil. As the details fell into place, I rehearsed every step in my mind, imagining the moment I would stand in the arrival hall and let them know that their lives were about to unravel. I envisioned the shock on their faces, the panic that would ripple through their carefully constructed world, and the satisfaction of watching as every lie they had told was exposed to the light of day. In my heart, I felt a mixture of righteous fury and a chilling calm, a determination so absolute that nothing could stand in its way. I had transformed my grief into a weapon, and every piece of evidence, every legal maneuver, was a step toward reclaiming not just my home and my finances, but my very identity. I vowed that by the time they realized the trap was set, it would be far too late to salvage anything of the life they had stolen from me. In the silence of those long, restless nights, as I pored over documents and meticulously planned every detail, I knew that this was not just an act of revenge. It was the reclamation of my future, the reassertion of my worth, and the beginning of a journey that would lead to the complete and utter downfall of those who had betrayed me. I would let them beg, stammer, and plead for mercy, but I would remain unmoved, steadfast in the knowledge that justice would be served and that every stolen moment, every ounce of deceit, would be repaid in full. I still remember the moment I picked up the phone and called my lawyer, Andrew Sterling, my trusted legal partner who had guided me through countless challenges, when the full scope of their fraud became horrifyingly clear. My voice, though heavy with anguish, carried an edge of determination as I recounted every detail. The forged documents, the unauthorized transfers, the emptied bank accounts that once promised a secure future for our family. Andrew's response was resolute and unflinching. He explained that what they had done was not merely a personal betrayal but a calculated act of financial fraud, a con that could and would be dismantled piece by piece. In that instant, I learned that Claire and her accomplice had transferred the ownership of our home using forged documents, documents that bore my signature, documents that I had never seen and would never have approved. And it wasn't just the house. Every penny I had painstakingly saved was now locked away in offshore shell companies, the money siphoned off with an efficiency that was almost clinical. I spent long, sleepless nights poring over bank statements and financial records, each transaction a dagger that confirmed the magnitude of their deceit. The 529 plan I had set up for our daughters, meant to secure their education and our legacy, had been decimated, drained of hundreds of thousands of dollars in a matter of months. Every expense, every luxury purchase that I once believed was a celebration of our success, now appeared as a calculated move to strip me of my financial security. I watched in disbelief as the numbers on my screen added up to a staggering $775,000, a sum that was not only a betrayal of my trust but an outright robbery of the future I had envisioned. Yet, in the cold, harsh light of that financial nightmare, I found a perverse sense of clarity. The paper trail they had so carelessly left behind was my salvation. A series of documents, transactions, and digital records that I knew would eventually expose their crimes beyond any doubt. I began working closely with forensic accountants and financial investigators, every meeting in a sterile conference room a small victory in the war I was waging. Each call, each email, every piece of evidence that I gathered was like a brick laid in the foundation of a trap that would one day bring them crashing down. I coordinated with every resource at my disposal, setting up fraud alerts on every account and ensuring that no dollar they had stolen would disappear without a trace. In the dim light of my study, surrounded by piles of documents and the incessant hum of my computer, I felt a resolve as hard as steel take hold. I knew that the path ahead would be fraught with legal battles, with the painstaking process of rebuilding what they had stolen, but I was prepared to wage that war. The financial trap was set meticulously. Every forged document, every fraudulent transfer was cataloged and cross-referenced, every piece of evidence secured with the knowledge that it would soon be the instrument of their downfall. I could almost taste the vindication that was coming, a slow, inexorable collapse of an empire built on lies. In that moment, as I stared at the cold, unyielding numbers that had once promised a secure future and now spelled betrayal, I resolved that I would reclaim every stolen cent, that I would rebuild not only the financial foundation of our life, but the very trust that had been shattered by their deceit. The money they had taken was a measure of their betrayal, and I would use that measure against them, transforming every fraudulent transaction into a testament to my determination to restore what was rightfully mine. And so, in the silence of that long, dark night, with only the soft click of the keyboard to keep me company, I began the process of constructing my financial trap, a trap that would ensnare them in their own web of deceit and force the truth out into the open, no matter the cost. As dawn broke the next morning, a sense of grim inevitability settled over me like a shroud. My lawyer, Andrew Sterling, had moved swiftly, freezing every account linked to Claire and her accomplice and challenging the forged documents that had stolen my home. I sat in a modest hotel suite that had become my temporary headquarters for the legal battle ahead, poring over stacks of legal notices and financial reports as I watched the trap I had so carefully set in motion tighten around them. Every phone call, every meeting with forensic accountants, every signed affidavit served as a building block in the collapse of their fraudulent empire. I could almost see the walls closing in on them, their financial records now under intense scrutiny, their once solid alibis crumbling under the weight of the evidence I had amassed. I remembered all those moments I had ignored. The secret phone calls, the red flags I had dismissed in my desperate hope that our love was unbreakable. Now, every overlooked detail was coming back to haunt them, each one a nail in the coffin of the life they had stolen from me. I could sense that they were beginning to realize that their carefully constructed facade was falling apart. My phone buzzed incessantly with notifications of legal updates and new evidence being uncovered, each message fueling my resolve and reinforcing the certainty that justice was within reach. I felt a cold, relentless satisfaction as I reviewed the details. James's financial records, now flagged for investigation, and the forged signatures that were being meticulously compared against mine by expert examiners. It was as if every small piece of deceit was being gathered, cataloged, and turned against them, leaving no room for escape. I sat there, silent and resolute, as the trap continued to tighten with every passing hour. I recalled the moment I had set my return ticket on the same flight they were taking, an act that now symbolized the inescapable fate that awaited them. I could feel the walls closing in, a pressure that was both exhilarating and terrifying, knowing that their empire of lies was on the verge of collapse. Each legal notice, each frozen asset, was a declaration that the betrayal I had suffered would not go unpunished, that every lie would be laid bare for the world to see. I thought back to the nights of silent anguish, the long hours spent poring over documents, and the bitter taste of betrayal that had driven me to this point. Now, all of that pain was transforming into a force of retribution, a force that would ensure that they could no longer hide behind their false promises. I listened to the quiet hum of the city outside my window, a stark reminder that while life moved on for everyone else, for me it had come to a standstill, each moment heavy with the impending reckoning. The trap was set, and I could feel its tightening grip with every new piece of evidence that emerged, every new legal maneuver that forced them further into a corner. In that quiet, tension-filled morning, I knew that the day when they would realize the full extent of their downfall was drawing near. A day when the truth, long suppressed, would finally burst forth with overwhelming force, leaving them exposed, vulnerable, and utterly defeated. I sat there, steeling myself for the inevitable confrontation, knowing that every minute brought me closer to a reckoning that would forever change the course of our lives. At exactly 9 a.m., the fragile calm I had built around my temporary sanctuary was shattered by the frantic sound of knocking at my hotel door, a knock that vibrated with a sense of urgency and impending doom. I took a deep, steadying breath before opening the door, not entirely sure what to expect but already knowing that this moment would mark the culmination of all the lies and betrayal that had defined the past months. Standing on the threshold were Claire and Jake, their faces a portrait of panic and disarray. Claire's eyes, which once sparkled with the warmth of our shared dreams, were now wide and filled with terror, her voice trembling as she tried to explain, "Please, I need to talk." Jake, on the other hand, looked as if he were about to crumble under the weight of the realization that everything he had built on deceit was now coming undone. His usually confident demeanor had given way to a desperate, almost broken look. I leaned casually against the doorframe, crossing my arms and offering a smile that was as cold as it was calculated. "Oh," I said softly, my voice measured and deliberate. "Are you here to fix the mess you created with the money you stole? Or to explain the forged documents that transferred the house to your names?" Their eyes darted between me and the printed boarding pass I held in my hand, a boarding pass that proved I was on the same flight, that I had been waiting for this moment all along. Claire's face contorted in a mix of regret and desperation as she stammered out a plea, "I'm sorry, I made a mistake." Before she could continue, I cut her off with a tone of finality. "No, Claire, I understand perfectly." Jake's voice, usually so assured, faltered as he mumbled, "We can fix this, man. Just give us a little help." I let the silence stretch out, every second heavy with the weight of the past and the certainty of what was to come. I invited them inside with a casual, almost disarming gesture, as if I were offering them the comfort of a friend rather than the final stage of their ruin. Once they crossed the threshold, I met their frantic eyes with an unwavering calm, knowing that every word they uttered now was nothing more than a desperate attempt to salvage a crumbling facade. The door closed behind them, and in that moment I could see the truth in their eyes, the truth that there was no escaping the consequences of their betrayal. I prepared myself for what I knew would be the final act of their downfall, a moment when every lie would be exposed and every stolen fragment of my life would be reclaimed. As they fumbled for words, I stood there, resolute and composed, my mind already orchestrating the final notes of their symphony of deceit. They believed, in their desperation, that I would somehow come to their rescue, that I would offer them a lifeline to salvage the remnants of the life they had so callously shattered. But as soon as they stepped into my room, the sound of another knock reverberated through the corridor, a knock that heralded the arrival of federal agents, men whose presence carried the weight of irrevocable justice. In the chaos that ensued, I watched with a grim sense of inevitability as the agents moved with precise, practiced efficiency, taking control of the situation in a matter of moments. A man named Marcus, a shadowy figure who had played a part in their scheme, lunged in a futile attempt to salvage something from the wreckage, only to be forcefully subdued by the agents who had no patience for further deception. Claire's anguished cry, "Please, I'm sorry, Ethan," echoed in the air, a heartbreaking sound that mingled with the stern voices of the agents as they announced, "You are under arrest." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee, allowing the bitter taste to unleash the finality of the moment, and then, looking directly into Claire's pleading eyes, I spoke with a voice that was calm yet unyielding. "I don't help criminals." Those words, spoken with the quiet authority of someone who had long since accepted the truth of betrayal, sealed their fate. In a matter of moments, they were escorted out of my life, their desperate protests and attempts at begging for mercy falling on deaf ears. As the door closed behind them, I felt a sense of closure wash over me, a perverse relief that justice, though delayed, had finally been served. In that silent, empty room, I realized that every lie, every act of treachery had led to this inescapable moment, and that from now on, I would never again be a victim of deceit. I stood there for a long while, letting the reality sink in, knowing that the final chapter of their betrayal had been written in the language of law and retribution. In the aftermath of their downfall, I began the slow and arduous journey of rebuilding my life from the shattered remnants of the past. The house that had once been stolen from me through forged documents and deceit was, after a grueling legal battle, returned to my name, a symbol of resilience and the reclamation of what was rightfully mine. Every court order, every signed document, felt like a small victory, a brick in the new foundation I was constructing, one that would be unyielding in the face of future betrayals. Alongside the recovery of my home, I methodically worked to recover the money that had been siphoned away, dollars that represented not just wealth, but the future I had planned for my family. It was a painstaking process, one that involved tracking down every illicit transaction, every unauthorized transfer, until I managed to piece together a semblance of financial security that had once seemed so elusive. With Claire and Jake now removed from my life, I turned my focus to the one constant that had remained through all the turmoil, my daughters, whose innocence and resilience had been marred by events they never deserved. I moved to a new part of the city, a place far removed from the ghosts of my past, where I purchased a modest penthouse that would serve as a fresh start, a blank canvas upon which I could rebuild not only my finances but my very identity. I dedicated myself to creating an environment of stability and love for my children, pouring every ounce of my energy into ensuring that they felt safe, cherished, and free from the shadows of betrayal. I repainted their rooms in bright, cheerful colors that evoked hope, replaced broken toys with new ones that promised a future filled with laughter, and made every evening a ritual of bedtime stories and gentle reassurances that no one would ever take away the love we shared. Slowly but surely, the pain that had once threatened to consume me began to recede, replaced by a cautious optimism that grew with each passing day. I reconnected with old friends, forging new relationships that were built on trust and mutual respect, and I even allowed myself the occasional indulgence in the pleasures of life. Solo trips to destinations I had long dreamed of, moments of solitude that allowed me to rediscover parts of myself that had been buried beneath the weight of betrayal. Every step forward, every small victory, felt like a testament to my strength, a silent declaration that I was more than the sum of my losses, that I was capable of creating a new, vibrant future free from the toxicity of the past. In the quiet moments of reflection, as I looked out over the skyline from my new penthouse and watched the city lights flicker like distant promises, I felt an overwhelming sense of triumph, a quiet, steady strength that reassured me that no matter how deep the wounds, they would eventually heal. I realized that rebuilding my life was not just about reclaiming what had been stolen, but about forging a new identity that was entirely my own, a future defined not by betrayal and regret, but by resilience, hope, and the unwavering love of a father for his children. And so, with every sunrise and every determined step forward, I embraced the challenge of rebuilding my life, knowing that the pain of the past would always be a part of me, but that it would no longer dictate my future. A year had passed since that fateful day when everything changed, a year of long nights, hard-won victories, and a gradual healing that had begun to fill the void left by betrayal. It was during this time that I came to realize that the past, no matter how painful, must remain just that, a past, not a chain that binds me to memories of deceit and heartache. One crisp morning, as I was going about my day with a sense of purpose and quiet determination, a letter arrived at my doorstep. I could feel its weight in my hands, an envelope that carried the desperate, pleading words of a woman who had once been a central part of my life, a reminder of a betrayal that had once nearly destroyed me. I hesitated, knowing that the contents of that letter would reopen wounds I had worked so tirelessly to heal. I placed it on the table and stared at it, feeling the pressure of the past pressing in like a suffocating fog. I knew without even opening it that it was nothing more than a final, desperate attempt by Claire to reclaim what she had lost, to beg for forgiveness for a betrayal that was too deep to ever be mended. Instead of succumbing to the lure of old regrets, I made a decision in that quiet moment that would define the rest of my life. I would not let the past have a seat at my table. With deliberate care, I set the letter ablaze, watching as the flames consumed every word, every last vestige of the betrayal that had once haunted my every waking moment. As the paper curled into ash and drifted away, I felt an overwhelming sense of liberation, a quiet, resolute promise that I would never again allow myself to be defined by the lies and deceit of those who had once claimed to be my family. I raised my glass to the skyline, the twinkling city lights a silent promise of new beginnings, and in that moment, I whispered the words that encapsulated everything I had learned through the fire of betrayal: never again. It was not a cry of triumph or revenge, but a gentle, yet unyielding declaration that I had reclaimed my future, that I would no longer let the scars of the past dictate the terms of my life. I had rebuilt my home, restored my finances, and most importantly, nurtured the unbreakable bond with my daughters, a bond that no act of betrayal could ever sever. As I looked toward the future, I embraced the truth that I had finally learned. The past is a lesson, not a life sentence. I stepped forward into a new chapter of my existence with a heart unburdened by the weight of old regrets and a soul fortified by the strength of hard-won resilience. In that moment, with the night sky as my witness and the gentle hum of possibility in the air, I vowed that I would never again allow anyone to steal my future, never again let betrayal define who I am. And so, as I moved forward, I carried with me the silent promise that every step I took would be guided by the lessons of the past and the unshakable belief that my life, my future, belonged solely to me and those I cherished above all else.